Now, if you want to create change and you want to impact, especially with innovation that is lesser known, you need a lot of trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the direction that you're going, and also trust in the people that you're bringing on board or you invest in. And this and a lot more is what we are going to discuss in today's conversation, where we are joined by, I would say, an early adopter, but an innovator at heart. Llew Jury is joining us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here, Petra. Thanks for having me.
I'm honestly so excited about our conversation because you've been a front runner in so many ways. You have developed websites before. We had all the easy tech that we could just do the drag and drop templates. You commercialized SEO when nobody knew what SEO was and scaled that digital business. And now you're investing in early stage startups and founders. I'm really curious, how did you get to where you're now? Give us a little bit of a background, how you've progressed in your career in such a diverse way.
Well, thanks, Petra. And yes, it's great to be here. And you know, I have to sort of first of all say that I firmly believe it's all the people that help you get here. It's not just myself. I think surrounding yourself with amazing people that are way more qualified and way more, way smarter than you is the way to look at it. You know, if you put really good people in certain roles and then they flourish and they become leaders in their own rights, that actually is probably the secret sauce to everything in the last 25 years that I've been doing. And so that's probably been my game plan and making sure that, that through every company that I've had, we've always had amazing people. But yeah, a bit of background about me. I've been in the digital game since 1997. And the reason I got into that is I went to university in the 90s and then came out and I thought I was going to do one career path. I thought I was actually going to go to Indonesia of all places, but that week that I was going to look at going and trying to apply for some programs, I basically the whole country collapsed, and I went into IT and I went into sales and product management of IT, and I got a taste for the IT side in the late 90s, and in early 99, my brother and I set up a web company. We thought, no one's really doing web properly. Let's get it going. And that allowed me then to really see that there was opportunity to not only just play games on the internet, but make true money and actually, more importantly, help companies, help people, and actually realize their opportunities to grow their own businesses. So I've always been in the B2B side of the internet, and as you said in the intro, I've had two companies that I've had exits from. My first two, and I've sort of done 10-year sprints, if you want to look at it like that. So in the 90s and early 2000s, I had a company called Alfresco. That was a web design company. It built some of the first mobile apps in Queensland and Australia for mining companies and the like. And then we sold that in 2006 to a consortium that was led by STW Group, which was a listed entity on the Australian Stock Exchange. So my brother and I were 50-50. That was a really good, 7 years of proving up what it's like to work with someone who happens to be your brother, but also, B, actually employ people. We had nearly 30 staff in the end, and we sold out to a company that wanted to expand into Queensland, and that was pretty cool. That allowed me to, really then set up my next business, which was Reload, and Reload I had for 16 years. 10 of those, the first 10 of those years, I was very active. I was the founder and managing director. And then, in 2016, I became the chair of that company and sort of stepped aside and handed it over to someone who's a superhuman who's still there today, called Craig Somerville. And Craig is still the managing director of that company. And, I did an exit this year in 2022 to Hardie Grant Media. And that was after 16 years. And, people go, well done, overnight success. That's literally what it takes. And so that was, as you said, it was an SEO company. One of the first companies to truly commercialize search, performance, content, analytics, and really focus on e-commerce and really make sure that companies could produce a great return on investment for their digital spend. And most recently, I set up, after I did a couple of years up at River City Labs here in Queensland, I was the entrepreneur in residence there as I was chair of Reload, and it gave me some time to really get deep into the startup community and sort of mentored a couple of programs, the Murides accelerator program, and that was just an eye-opener. I learned a huge amount. It was like going back to school again, and learning. And but the big thing about that whole place is it's all about community. It's all about giving. And so I set up Sprint Ventures which is a venture capital firm, in 2019 with 3 other co-founders, and I'm managing partner of that. And we're now in Queen Street in Brisbane with 12 investments across Australia, mainly in the southern states in Melbourne and Sydney. And we've invested in companies like Ausbiz, the business channel, Vapor, which is artificial intelligence in sewer pipes, and UPay here in Queensland, which is an exciting fintech. So my time these days is all about raising capital and investing in truly great founders and generational companies.
It's so fascinating, and I love this journey, because in the end you have been on both sides. You were one of the first. And so people had to kind of trust you, because, websites back in that day was like this fade, this is going away again. And then search, nobody knew what that was. What did you do to establish this trust with potential buyers in the first place?
It's all about trust, and you're spot on, Petra, about this podcast. And, trust is everything. There's been lots of studies over the years about how people value quality, and, trust and relationships are number one, here in Australia, but also throughout the world. And, trust is something that we've always focused on, whether it was my brother and I or Craig and I at Reload, building trust and building up that equity with people is really, really important. An example for you there is in 2006, when I sold Alfresco, I had to have a couple of years restraint as part of my agreement. When you sell to an ASX, sometimes they say, or you sell anyway, they sometimes say, look, 2 to 3 years, you're not allowed to go and work for someone and compete. And that's cool. You should have a check, and, you should be spending some time with your kids like I did, and, and doing all of that. So a couple of years after that, what I did was I sat out my restraint period, and then I went and talked to all my ex-competitors. And I said, look, you guys are all web designers. And this is a lot of companies that are still going today. You guys are great web designers. I'm not doing websites anymore. I've sold that business. But hey, I've got this new thing called search engine optimization. And so when you finish building a website, why don't you give it to us at Reload, and we'll SEO it and we'll help your client out. And 50% of our leads came through that channel. And I went back and asked them often, why did you do that? And the number one reason was, Llew, we trust you. We trust you because not only of you as a human, but we trust you because you've actually been in the industry for the last 7 or 8 years. We know that you know what you're talking about, and we trust you that you're not going to compete and steal the client off of us. So there's a lot of trust, and that was amplified by the end of it. In those first few years, we had about 120 partners that really helped amplify the Reload name around the world. And that trust actually built the product that we then, when I sold, had about 320 clients throughout the world in 4 offices.
Oh, fantastic. And, also, I think your trust was built by you being consistent in delivering high quality. Like, this is the basic these days.
Yeah.
You can't deliver bad product or service. But then also content, like you've been one of the first content marketers and have contributed to different outlets, and that also built your credibility and with that authority. And even now, 2022, when you think it should be normal for any leader, for any entrepreneur to actually put themselves out there, share the story, share some of their experience, people still don't do it.
It's so tough. Look, I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome. Some people sort of, call it imposter syndrome, but I think this content piece about entrepreneurs marketing themselves, we've all got it. And often it's a time thing. It's often it's the last thing on the list. There's about 50 other things on that day that you're going to solve. And generally it's people, if you're hiring or, you're trying to get some work done and things like that. And content gets pushed down, the social media play, the content amplification, the building your own personal brand often gets sort of, I'll kick that can down the road and I'll do that over the next few days. But you got to physically remind yourself that your personal brand is pretty much the thing that's going to amplify your business. So it actually should be, in conjunction with what you're doing. A good example there, Petra, is in 2018, I started mentoring the Mira D second, or was it number 4 cohort, but it was my second time around at Mira D. And Yaz Grigalunas from World's Biggest Garage Sale was in that particular cohort. And I remember sitting down, and Yaz will, if she hears this, she'll remember this. We talk about it all the time, that we actually had 2 plans for content. we had planned for World's Biggest Garage Sale, and we had a plan for Yaz. So we sort of treated those two differently. And we actually said at one point, you could actually have two marketing managers or interns, if you like. It's all bootstrapped, so there's not much money around, but two interns, one looking after brand Yaz and one looking after brand World's Biggest Garage. And so she did that. Yaz basically implemented that and you know, met the premier the other day and was talking to her, and she's just raised $4 million via Officeworks for her World's Biggest Garage Sale. So if you look, you know, 4 years time, you know, that's a great example. One example there that we looked at, and the prioritization that we did every Monday morning about brands and brand application, which is really what I did for those 6 months with Yaz, was around building her own meetup. And no one was doing a circular economy meetup. And what we did was we said, look, well, why don't you own the meetup? If brand Yaz is the MC and it's sponsored by World's Biggest Garage Sale, then you can actually own the oxygen in that space. So brand Yaz has a presence and the World's Biggest Garage Sale has a presence. And that amplified her. And within a number of months, she had hundreds of people showing up in the stadium there at River City Labs because she prioritized you know, that brand and that content.
Absolutely. And especially nowadays where we see democratization of information, we trust person brands a lot more, or employees or the leader a lot more than a company brand. So leveraging both, and you're right, they should go hand in hand. Like you shouldn't have a conflict between the two. And, you know, funny enough, I've known Yes for, get this, 11 years. Wow. We met at a triathlon squad, and she was and is exactly the same person that I met 11 years ago. She was always caring. She was always for the community. She's now taking it to the next level, but it also shows, and, you know, I've known her when she was still in corporate, like a salesperson, and she's completely reinvented her career just because she has stuck to her true values, her personality, and now has connected it with a global trend.
And yes, and spot on. And yeah, spot on, Petra. And I think the key word there is authentic. And I think that, you know, being authentic with your content and being authentic about truly who you are, there's no point anymore. You don't often hear anymore, fake it till you make it, and all those sort of silly words, especially in that startup scene. It's actually just be authentic, be yourself, and, you know, find your own groove with your content. And I think a key channel there is find your own channels and the vernacular and the tone that people actually want to consume. So as an example, we know that at Sprint, you know, a lot of the investors and a lot of the startups and a lot of the people who are supporters and friends are on LinkedIn. So we tailor all of our content. Our center of our universe is LinkedIn, and other channels are important, but if we get it right on LinkedIn, we know that we get the most validity. And I think the way that you can assess this is not just in the, you know, the stats and the, you know, the Google Analytics and all the social analytics that you can look at. It's actually when someone bumps into you now that we're sort of, you know, doing a lot more in real life, or IRL, as I talk to my kids. As we do more IRL, people go, gee, you've been active, you've been out there, I've seen a lot of posts, things must be going well. And that's because you know that target audience that you're really wanting to connect with at those events, or become potential customers or become investors, they're actually seeing you before you actually see them in real life. So it's sort of, you know, you're supporting your whole journey. But I think the key message there is be authentic, and then know the channels that your key target audiences are going to be consuming.
Absolutely. I 100% focus on LinkedIn also because, you know, speaking of search, it's a search engine. And when we do business with each other, it's a professional platform. Like, we don't have to share what we had for breakfast or whatever. Nobody cares. But you also said really importantly, what I want to highlight is people already follow you, and perception is reality. When they see you all the time, they build already relationship and trust before they've met you. And when we think of hiring somebody, or, you know, potentially going into business with somebody, we want to be sure that it's the right choice before we even meet them. So we would do some, you know, professional stalking and Googling them, and then LinkedIn comes up. It's one of the first 3 search results, trusted source of information. So this is the only platform to really, you know, focus on, I would also say, at this stage, especially when we are busy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really nice balance, LinkedIn, of, you know, that social media element and the business element, and really sort of telling people subtly that what you're up to and what you're excited of doing, and sharing it. So after this, when I see this on the, you know, this podcast, for example, on LinkedIn, I'll share this, and that goes out to my supporters and the people that are, you know, in mine, my areas, and it's just by that natural share allows you to amplify your reach really quickly. So yeah, I'm a big supporter of LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And I always say, just connect personal and professional. Like when you say, yes, you went to a breakfast, but rather than saying it was a great breakfast, nobody cares. What have you learned? Who have you met? What are you working on? Fake it till you make it. Why would we? Like, I have got a credibility framework, and one of the 3 ways to build credibility is on the go, that you literally take people on the journey and say, I just got this role. I have applied for the first time. We are developing this prototype, even before it's perfect, because people are interested in the journey and they want to be part of it, rather than just saying, ta-da, and by the way, now buy it. It's like, no.
Yeah, it's sort of, we've moved on from that, haven't we, Petra? We've moved on from that, really trying to push things to people. And I mean, I'm sure every listener on this podcast would agree that you turn off if you look at those posts on LinkedIn that are just a bit salesy and a bit pushy. You sort of go, oh, I don't want any of that. It's a bit of, I like to call it business leisure time. It should be a bit of a break for you in your leisure time within business, to see what's getting an update from people and seeing what's happening. So yeah, agree.
Exactly. Connect educational content with entertaining content. So it's still lighthearted, but there's some value behind it, and not just clunking up the system for no reason.
One final piece about LinkedIn is what I try and do on every post, because I don't want to be here forever in this, this role. I have succession in mind. I have 10-year sprints, as you probably gather, Petra. What I do is always tag in my staff, my Chief Operating Officer, Georgia, or today I did a post with Michelle from Vapor, one of our portfolio companies. So I tag both of them in to the post because I want them, I want to put them up in lights rather than just me. So in fact, I did that through the sprint channel without even Llew Jury on there, which I think is really important if you're looking at succession in a business in the future.
And this, spot on. You prepare with building your personal brand, not just for right now, for the success right now, but for the future. And when people get to know you beyond your title and beyond your credential and beyond your profession, they see, he's a really good relationship builder. We actually need somebody who builds our community. You may have never held the professional title of community builder, but people connect the dots by themselves. So
they do, don't they?
You want to be that. Yes. Speaking of Sprint VC, I'm super curious. You invest in early stage startups.
Yes.
And your tagline, which I love, is founders first. Now, what does it even mean? And secondly, what are you looking for in founders?
Yeah, great question. Founders First came around because during my time I've done a bit of angel investing beforehand, and founders are actually team members as well. Founders First is not just the founder of a startup; it's actually all the team members and all the supporters and all the advisors behind that particular, that founder. And so it goes a lot deeper. And in essence, if you surround great founders and their teams and their supporters with different forms of great capital, so that's social capital, experiential capital, network capital, workforce capital, and also financial capital. So not just a check, but it's more than a check. They're more likely to produce that magic that provides ultimately an alpha return for an investor. So if you put the founders at the front and you surround them with really great love and attention and care and guide them as much as you physically can and possibly can within the day, the day-to-day that you have, and if you can't, you refer them to others to help guide them. They're more likely to succeed. So at Sprint, we invest in approximately 1 in 100 that we see, 1 in 100 companies and founders. They're generally the very, very best founders. They're extremely passionate. They're resolute. They're resilient, but they're most importantly driven on their key life's work to solve the problem that they're solving through their solution. Generally, they're building something that's globally scalable. They're building a generational company, which means a company that will survive well beyond myself and my kids and their kids. They're all about making and building a better future, which is our sort of motto in the back of our office here in Queen Street is build a better future. It's up on the wall because we believe the great founders are actually solving true generational problems. And we invest in health and aging, which is solving generational issues. Artificial intelligence and automation, we've invested heavily in infrastructure and property and energy, and also fintech and the e-commerce world. So we invest in certain areas and in the truly great founders that are solving those big global problems that are going to be, fixing the issues of tomorrow.
Excellent. And what I want to highlight is that you've just listed soft skills. They need to be passionate, they need to be in it, they need to be resilient. Because if founders are so much in love with their idea, but that might not be the real problem solver, and it could go into a different direction, and they're upset with you, like, this is not what we want. you back the person behind the idea, isn't it?
Yeah, so founders first, exactly. And most VCs will do this these days. Like, they'll back the founder in first, they'll back the global scalability, they'll back the margin or the business model of the business, and about number 4 or 5 is the technology. A lot of companies sort of think technology is number 1 and look at my product and it's awesome and it's going to change the world. It's actually whether that founder, no matter whether that's the product or not, they might have to pivot, they might change, they might go and do something else, whatever. But if that founder actually truly believes, then that's the thing that's actually going to drive it. And I think that, there's an education going on around, we back in the founder first before we back in the tech.
And you also stick to your values when you say, if we are building a future, then we invest in technology that supports certain industries that we see where the future goes into. But the question is also, we see health and aged care, they're big industries, but at the same time, how do you spot trends that actually will move the needle in those industries? How do you back this one idea over this other idea?
Well, Petra, it's you've got to be, as an investor, you have to have deep domain expertise. And the 4 of us, that's the 4 swim lanes and the 4 areas of investment. We all have deep domain expertise. Mine is, of course, e-commerce and digital and the fintech side, and the artificial intelligence and automation side. Heath Shonin, our chair, is health and aging. And we often say, look at things like the Royal Commission into Aged Care, which actually had a number of recommendations. And you go to the top of those recommendations and it says nutrition, communication, and all these other things that are very, very important when the federal government funds that type of approach to fixing these major issues within, the most vulnerable of our society, which is the aging. And we're all going to be there one day. And so the way we look at it is, if my mum was in there or my dad was in there, or if I was in there, how would I want to be treated? So what sort of technology and what sort of, businesses are going to solve those problems? And what we do through Care Factor, which is an aged care accelerator program, is actually select 10 of the best every year. And we put them through a 3-month incubator. And then we're the only VC in there, but we actually look to invest in, the aged care thematic. And we've invested in Halo, MediStays, UMPS Health, and a couple of others that basically are moving the needle from communication software, full software, and accommodation.
And, entrepreneurial skills, they're so important, especially, over the last couple of years. What COVID-19 has shown us is that nothing is safe. There is no guarantee for any industry. Travel was up and then it wasn't existent from one day to the other. And the only way to stay ahead, to be relevant, and to also future-proof your career, your business, is to think outside the box. How can you solve a bigger problem using your skill sets and your network and your strength, and then create a solution on that? But nobody teaches us entrepreneurship as such. What are some ways that you would recommend everyone to become a little bit more entrepreneurial, also when they are in a corporate role and they never want to leave, maybe?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of ways to look at it. Richard Branson often talks about entrepreneurs, and there's someone in a corporate role that actually can be entrepreneurial, but being an entrepreneur within an existing division or system within a corporate or an institutional organization. It's often difficult to do that because there's a glass ceiling of how high you can push before you get knocked down, because there's always business as usual things to do. There's always the daily business activity to get done. But look, I think everybody can be an entrepreneur. And if everybody, I would recommend that you go and hang out at those community type events and get to know the startup community. Become a mentor. If you're into marketing, go and mentor someone to help them scale and grow with their personas or customer journeys or whatever it is. But I think being immersed, and I like to use a couple of words there. One is osmosis. If you're hanging around the people, then you're naturally going to sort of pick up the good vibes and also the really good techniques and tips that will really help. Some of those companies. So you can learn off others. That's the first thing. And the second thing is the collisions, the great collisions that happen when you're actually at networking events. bumping into people like we did, Petra, recently in Cairns, like those sort of things at the Tropical Innovation Festival, which is a perfect example, allow you to come together and actually connect. And I think that to be an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, you need to actually you need to put yourself out there, and you need to sort of really, make sure that's the first thing you do. It's a personal thing. It's your own personal journey. The second thing is, if you ever go and think about setting up a startup or even doing something as an entrepreneur in-house, make sure you're solving a generational problem. We see a lot of deals, as I said, we invest in 1 in 100. And I'd say, half of those generally that we say no to either not on our mandate, which are those 4 critical things that we're investing in, which we like to call sovereign important, things. But actually they're not solved. There's companies that aren't solving a big enough opportunity to really move the needle. So they might be solving a really small thing that's really important to them, but they're not actually solving something that's, just quite wide enough and large enough. So if you are going to look at becoming an entrepreneur, look at solving a big problem. And the final third tip is make sure you have true hunger and passion for something that you're doing. And I often say, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to sort of build your hobby, something that you're truly, really keen on, because there's going to be times that it gets so tough. And unless you really care deeply about that thematic or that industry that you're solving a problem for, it's very, very tough to get out of bed in the morning if you're a long way away from realizing revenue and getting lots of customers, when you could be on a nice job working for someone else. There's always that crossing the chasm moment where you need to keep pushing through. So you've got to be truly, passionate about your particular industry.
Excellent tips. I always say optimize for interest and not for proficiency, because nowadays where so many jobs come and go and industries come and go, we don't know what we're doing in 5, 10, 15 years, and whatever we're doing now, it's probably, or hopefully not the same what we're doing then. And there's a saying, your best thinking 5 years ago is now your biggest luggage, because time is changing.
Definitely
technology is disrupting.
Definitely don't. And it's come to roost this year for me that you can't think about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I won the Young Business Person of the Year for the Lord Mayor's Business Awards. It was a long time ago, and I wouldn't be able to qualify these days. In fact, they lowered the age soon after I won it. But that was 2012. So 2012, I won the Young Business Person of the Year. Why? Because I had an SEO company. That was innovation. That was innovation back in 2012, that we were doing it differently, fast-growing company on the global stage. That was seen as innovation. Now, SEO and performance is now a key part of everybody's content roadmap. And just 10 years ago, I won that award. You would be hard pressed to win the same award now in across different awards that are out there. So that's a good example that look 10 years ahead, but don't dwell on what's in the past.
Exactly. And another important aspect that you mentioned is the proximity principle, the osmosis. There's no excuse these days anymore to not learn from somebody who is where you want to be eventually. It could be as an informal mentor through just listening to the podcast or the YouTube channels, or going to events and actually mix and mingle.
Oh, look, there's nothing like it. And we crave, especially after COVID and the break, we crave that human attention. And I felt it myself. I've traveled everywhere on planes this year just to get out and see all our partners and portfolio companies and investors, and catch up with lots and lots of people throughout Australia. I've traveled everywhere. It's been awesome, and I think that's because we've been locked up, and we're now out there. And I would encourage everybody just to go as hard as they can to go and meet and greet everybody. I've found a real difference this time round that people are way happy to see you. So don't fear that, if you've got any fear about catching up with anybody, just reach out to them and say, I'd love to buy a coffee. I'm coming to Sydney or coming to Melbourne and coming wherever. Like just go and reach out to people, because they're going to be really receptive to catching up.
Absolutely. And hardly anyone does it. So when you actually do it, you stand out, and people, as you said, they are more than happy to do that. Now, speaking of catching up, what is the best way to connect with you, learn more about you? I see you also do office hours with Sprint. What is the best way to stay in touch with you?
Yeah, great. So sprint.vc, so sprint.vc for venture capital. If you go into there, you can check out what we're doing. It's info@sprint.vc is the email address. You can connect in that way. I'm also on LinkedIn personally, so Llew Jury, LLEWJURY. On LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect with me. If you are really keen on asking me a question, send me a message, a DM, and normally I can get back to you fairly quickly on that. I'm also on Twitter as well under the handle Reloader with an A, so Reload A. I'm not going to change that one. That was my my Reload handle, but you know, I'm on there too, so I'm often you know, accessible that way. And based in Queensland. So yeah, we're in Queen Street in Brisbane.
Beautiful. Well, I'll definitely put all the links in the show notes, and would encourage anyone who is looking for investment or even just some startup guidance, mentoring, to reach out. Thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Awesome. It's been great to be on today, and look forward to catching up soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.